Hi. So imagine you've owned a business for 30 years, right? Over that time, you've compiled and stored, whether paper or digital or both, thousands of documents, millions of emails, financial data, CRM, contacts, projects, customers, employees. Now, and this is what the world of AI will tell you, put that into an AI and ask things like, why do we do things this way? Now, an AI, if it's a reasonable level, well-constructed one, and it has access to the information, can probably find the policy. It can find the email. It can find the contract. Great. But ask, why did we decide not to do it the other way? Right? Now, what that tells us, the answer is likely to be either I don't know or an hallucination because you've put pressure on the AI to come up with something that it just doesn't know and has no way of knowing. So I think the point is that the most valuable information in a company isn't often stored in the systems. It's in people's heads. Now, what we've done, or what I've done, is been building AI tools and platforms over the last couple of years, and it's led me to understand that really what we need is an organisational intelligence project, one that basically says, what if AI could remember a company? What if AI could remember why the company and the people in the company do the things they do, things that aren't written down? I mean, we spent decades digitising companies. We've turned almost everything into data, but we've confused data with knowledge. Because there's really three layers, right? Let's take data. We say data is what happened. The invoice got paid. The customer called. Project got delayed. Contract got signed. Fantastic. That's data, right? And absolutely, the AI can say, yep, I looked and the invoice got paid on this date and was certainly paid. Then there's information. What does the data tell us, right? Okay, so we can look at the information about the customer or the invoice or the contract or the project, and we can say, yep, the customer's been with us for 17 years, or the project is 3 weeks behind, or that supplier missed 4 deadlines. But then we come to what's called organisational knowledge. And why does that matter? The question is, okay, well, the suppliers missed 4 deadlines. According to a policy, right, that would normally mean that we don't use that supplier anymore. Ask the AI why we still use that supplier. Ask why does that customer get these unusual payment terms? Ask why don't we enter that market? Why do we personally call this customer when something goes wrong? Right? And the whole idea is that a company is more than the information contained in its systems. It contains a history of decisions. Decisions have reasons. Reasons have context. Context changes over time. We all know that. I mean, one of the best ways I describe AI to anybody who's sort of still catching up with it is it's all background and context. If I have a very, very bright intern comes into the company, very intelligent, very enthusiastic, very eager, and I ask them to do something, in and of itself, they may or may not be able to do the task. They won't understand why. They won't understand how it fits into the company, into its operations. They won't understand what my objectives are. They understand why that thing has to happen in that way at this time because they don't have that background and context. So you always have to give that. And whether it's an AI or your child or your wife or any work colleague, you have to give that background and context, right? And that's what AI generally lacks when it starts to be a data collecting, manipulating type of tool, right? It can do the things which in many cases doesn't even need an AI, right? It can be a process automation. Sometimes people do AI and agentic things because they do AI and agentic things, not necessarily because it's the right tool for the job. Now, let's talk about a company that I did some work with. It was an equipment hire company, and it had, relatively good systems. It had CRM. It had an equipment management system. It had the account systems, it had databases, it had all sorts of things, right? And yet every time you wanted to know something, you had to go to the boss because there was so much in here about customer relationship, about that piece of equipment, about all sorts of things that just doesn't get into the company systems. So it's all here. Now, that's normally the founder, the CEO, the ops manager, someone who's been here 20, 25 years. It's Bruce in the corner, right? Or it's Cheryl in accounts. You just go to them because it's a quicker way to try and get an answer than any other way to do it. So, and we say, why do we do this? They don't look it up. They remember, right? They say, more particularly, right? Now, I know this can be a bit of a blocker sometimes, but treat it, with the concept of corporate memory. Someone new comes into a company and says, and this was me. I went to that company and I said, look, here's how I think we should do X, Y, Z, right? We should have done some local print advertising. We should have done this. This is the way to do it. And by the time I waded through all of my wonderful ideas, I went back to the founder and I went back to the accounts person, and they said, yeah, okay, well, we tried that. And for good reason, they had tried that and stopped doing it. And context, right, and background. I checked with them, they gave me the context, and yeah, I fully agree with them that wasn't the appropriate way to go. So one way to think about it, and this is, I guess, where at the more both the enterprise level, but also the SME level, right? Whether it's a branch manager, department head, the founder and owner of the company, there's always the question, and this is something that I think that is recognised, but not necessarily prioritised. The question is, what happens when the person who remembers leaves? Right? They retire, they resign, they get ill, they die, there's an acquisition, there's restructuring, all sorts of things. So all the docs are still there, all the policies are still there, such as they may be. The information and data is still within the systems. That doesn't go away, but it completely loses context. So what we've done over the years as a society who has companies and businesses, we've built extraordinary systems for storing what the organisation has. We've built, if we built any, much weaker systems for preserving what the organisation knows. Now, let's just say that the AI didn't have access to the company's information, right? What if the AI could actually remember the company, as people do, right? Because the person who's been in the company for 20 years alongside Cheryl in accounts and the boss, right, also knows many things about how things are done. And so what would it remember? As a person would. It would remember people. Who knows what? Who has the influence? Who has a history with who? With a client, with other internal people. It would know decisions. It would know what did we decide and when and why and how and who decided. What did we think about when we made that decision, right? The AI would remember if we could make that true. Why did we make that decision? Why does this customer matter so much to us? Why do we trust that supplier? Why does this customer get different terms? I mean, why, even though the policy says X, Y, Z, why do we ignore it for that circumstance? Looking at it as an information and data collection and processing situation, that may make no sense. But with context, because for all we know, that supplier is actually an investor in the company, for example, or supported the company through tough times, or we don't know. We don't have that context. But what if the AI could know that context the same as the people in the company? It would know what we've tried, what failed, what worked, what did we learn? And that's hugely different from a chatbot with a large document library. I think you'd agree with that, yeah? And now we come to how that could work. As I said, this is an exploration. I haven't come to the solution. I've been working on a number of things over the years that kind of led me to this. They kind of pyramided onto each other. One was because I love voice agents. So voice agents just for the chatbot factor rather than having a no voice chatbot. That led me to, okay, well, how do we get things actually done? And then it became sort of a process automation thing, and the chatbot just fed that into the process automation, and that was part of the process. One of the things that I was doing in the past few years was looking at companies to buy them and saying, okay, well, what are the things that are important about buying companies? As a thing from setting up a new company and buying a company that's got the expertise. And quite often the issue was, it wasn't that the company wasn't successful, that they didn't have great systems, but it wasn't enough. You'd have to spend so much time in these companies to extract the corporate knowledge out of the heads of the people in the company. And that's been the challenge, because if organisational intelligence, which is where I'm kind of looking at now and exploring, if that means that you can retain that corporate intelligence, the corporate memory and knowledge, and build it into an organisational intelligence, how would we do that? Is it possible at all? Just the challenges of it. So that's this series of videos and some of the posts I've been doing on LinkedIn is really about opening that conversation up. I'm not here to solve it. It's going to be a lengthy episodic process for this to go through some of my thinking and some of the learning. That I'm going to be doing some interviews as well with people in the organisational space, in the AI and technical space, to try and inform myself as to, is this a journey that has a positive goal at the end? Is it something that we can't do? Is it something to just, as a nice theoretical thing, we'll keep it in the bottom drawer because it's not going to be something we can actually do? But I think it's worth the journey, and certainly it'll inform a lot of the things that I do. So hopefully, if you're following along on this series, it may inform some of the things you do as well. So, again, something like, okay, here's a company, right? Let's call them Smith Plumbing, for example. And I'll refer to construction-related things because I've been in construction for some time, but it's relevant to all industries. Now, why are we careful about Smith's Plumbing? If we're people, we know that Smith Plumbing let us down a couple of times, or Smith Plumbing overcharged us, or whatever it was. But we're careful about them. We still use them, but we're careful about them. Now, for that to be extractable from the human mind of the people in the company, the AI would need to reconstruct the history, the relationship, the decisions, what happened, when happened, why happened, how that all worked. So, basically we would be able to identify that this company was suitable for some things perhaps, but not for others. And that might be how we go about dealing with the company, right? So it's not about just retrieving a document, it's about reconstructing the organisational context. Now, this is not about, promoting AI as a world-beating solution. What we're talking about is looking at the tools that we have, always look at the tools that we have and understand whether those things are going to be useful to us or not. Now, and you can't record everything, right? We already generate trillions and trillions of terabytes of stuff, more emails, more this, more that, more digital this and whatever else. The questions kind of in the process of looking at how we might build out organisational intelligence is, what should the AI remember? What should it forget? What should it trust? How is it to know what to trust? What was just someone's opinion? And why this decision, the latest one on a particular topic, superseded the previous one? And the context of other previous decisions, is that still valid? Right? It could be that we did certain things because of regulations, and those regulations have changed. So we need to rethink about how we go about making decisions, doing things, buying decisions. So that's kind of where, it's a fairly free-flowing mind dump on my part and exploratory, asking questions. Hopefully some of you guys out there have got some answers, right? You've explored this yourself. you've got experience and examples of things that you could share with me, and I'm happy to talk to anybody. We'll set up a meeting. We'll have a conversation. I'll talk to anybody about the whole broad, width and breadth of things to try and get a better understanding as to how collectively we could build what I'm terming organisational intelligence using the tools that are now available that just weren't before. So what I'm wondering is whether we've been thinking about AI and how it deals with companies as a storage problem, right? But perhaps it's not. Perhaps it's a reasoning problem, because the company doesn't just need somewhere to store its past. It needs a system capable of understanding what happened, why it happened, what was learned, what remains true, how that history should influence the next decision. Now, and I'll give you an example, right? I'm in construction. Project management is key. One of the things I built into the platform I'm using is lessons learned. Every time we screw it up, we take all that information, that context, dump it into the system, and then run through a lessons learned process so that we not only understand what the problem was and what fixed it, but what led up to it. And quite often, that is early decisions or early non-decisions or, a number of things. And of course, the intent from my perspective is to make sure that if we do it once, we don't do it twice, but, hopefully we all collectively learn over the time. Now, I'm going to go into a bit more broader approach here. What happens when organisational memory becomes what I call computational? Now, that means that you can actually take all of that data and the information and add the context layer, and then help the AI through the interactions with employees, for example, that the AI understands the context behind their work. It can reason from the company's history. And that means that accumulated judgment becomes less dependent on personal knowledge. And that's really what the whole objective of this is. As I said, when I started this particular journey, it was to see how we could help owners of businesses who are looking, and particularly at the latter part of their working life, who may wish to retire and sell the business, whatever. How do we help them become more valuable by providing them with tools and means to extract that knowledge, and not just theirs, but those within the company as well, to a point where we do have context behind the information and the data. So when the founder leaves, that knowledge doesn't disappear. And an acquirer could actually take that company from where it is with now what would be great systems, great context around the business, and hopefully take it to the next level. So that's kind of the kind of framework around why I'm exploring organisational intelligence, because I'm looking to see how we can help founders and owners of businesses at that stage in life to be able to create more value on their exit. So the idea is that the AI agents would operate with the company's memories and rules and history and judgment. And it's not that they'll be just more intelligent, but they'll be situated inside the memory of an organisation. So that's the framework for the next series of these that I'm going to be putting out. So I guess the question I'm going to leave you with is, why is so much of the real knowledge of a business still trapped inside people's heads? Perhaps the problem isn't that companies don't have enough information. Perhaps the problem is that all that information isn't organised around meaning and context. So I thank you for that. Dennis McMahon here from Corporate AI Solutions, signing out. The next episode is going to be the knowledge gap. What do companies know more than their systems do? And we'll be exploring this in more detail. So thank you very much for everybody, and hopefully you enjoyed this. Feel free to comment below. Feel free to contact me, and let's have a conversation about your experiences, and let's see where this might lead us. Excellent. Thank you, people.